We welcome in, we'd like to have him more often than that, but once a month we welcome in our district attorney, Hillar Moore. Oftentimes brings with him a guest, and that guest today is Steve Danielson, the Assistant Chief of Crime Strategies. Gentlemen, welcome in. How are you?
Great. How you doing, Brian?
Well, glad to have you all both on this morning. Glad to be chatting as we near the end of the year. Let's get an update on some numbers. Where are we at in East Baton Rouge?
Yeah, so first, Steve Danielson is the Section Chief of the Crime Strategies Unit, and hopefully he can discuss a little bit about what he does and what the unit does and what it
we can start there.
By.
Absolutely.
I think it'd be a good idea to start with that, and then
let's roll.
We can get into the numbers, Steve.
Yeah.
So the Crime Strategies Unit is a unit with the DA's office, but we work really closely with the City Police, the Sheriff's Office, and our other law enforcement partners. And we're blessed with having been or being staffed with Louisiana National Guard counter-drug intelligence analysts, and they assist us greatly in gathering the numbers of homicides, of non-fatal shootings, of fatal overdoses. They help track it. They help. They present every 2 weeks to our law enforcement partners, kind of a summary of what's been going on, or their hot spots, or their bad areas, or their really kind of trending criminal issues that need to be addressed. And it's a great. I think it's a great component with our criminal justice system here in East Baton Rouge Parish. Mm-hmm. The analysts are really invaluable and assist us greatly in keeping track of all the numbers, so we can kind of help our law enforcement partners address the needs of our community.
Let's talk about the hot spots for a minute, because the chief always talks about this. Murphy Paul always talks about this. This is people in places. People in places.
Correct.
Baton Rouge has more than its fair share of hot spots, does it not?
It has some that are just historically relatively plagued with crimes of violence and shootings and overdoses. So,
do we know what creates these hot spots? Is it opportunity? Is it just the socioeconomic makeup of the neighborhood? What brings us to getting those places?
I think it's both. I mean, I think some areas of our community just don't have the resources available to them. They're plagued with blighted properties. They have great people that live in them, but they're not necessarily kept up with the proper infrastructure we would need to make it a safer area. And so when you have places like that, you'll have some people that will take advantage of those places and the people that live there, and crime will just kind of get out of control at times.
From your end, and I mean yours is from the strategy and from the intelligence gathering end and analyzing that, but how tough is the path out? It feels like once you're in disrepair, it's tougher to get back, clean again.
It's like credit card debt. I mean, you can go too far into credit card debt, and it's really hard to dig your way out of it. And I think there has to be a lot of community investment in parts of our town and our parish that could help us. But those are kind of long-term strategies. The more short-term strategies is to really focus on those people who would prey on others, who are doing some of the worst crimes. Everybody always says about 15 to 20% of the population will drive 80% of the crime, and that's one of the things that we kind of know to be true. And trying to, focus our prosecution efforts on those people, to sit them down for a minute and get them out of the community, I think helps all of us.
We're talking with Steve Danielson and District Attorney Hillar Moore. So what kind of numbers are we looking at right now?
So, Steve, you want to go with the numbers? You want me to do the homicides look like at this point that we're down around 25% from last year.
Okay. Now, that sounds good on its surface, but last year was ridiculous.
Right, but still, let's start with...
No, absolutely.
Let's say we made progress.
Yes.
And it's 25%, which is significant. Mm-hmm. Still, we have a couple of weeks to go. But then if you compare us and look at Orleans. So Orleans was horrible last year, and this year they're worse than they were last year. So they trended one way. We obviously are trending the other, which is good. But your point is well taken. We are happy that we're down 25%.
Right.
But not because the number last year was 150 or 149, year before 119. So we're going down, which is good, but we want to get better.
No, absolutely. More work to go, but you don't want to let things go by without at least acknowledging the progress.
Correct. And one thing that maybe Steve can speak a little bit to this is that 70802 has been our hotspot recently, along with 70805. They're back and back with each other. But I think that we are 70816 as of today or this year is maybe one homicide more than 02 and 05. So that 70816 has been bouncing up some, and that's part sheriff, part police department around toward I believe the Glen Oaks area. I'm not positive of the entire 70816, and I don't have the map in front of me, but that number caught me last week.
70816.
So that's a difference this year that we haven't seen in other years with that zip code.
Interesting stuff. What about non-fatal shootings?
So because the number of homicides are down, naturally you would think that non-fatals and shooting incidents are down. And in fact, shooting incidents by itself are down, and also and I think around 10%. Non-fatal shootings, that is, what bullet to body, they're likewise down as well. And I think so. It does make sense. I think some of the better news is for the last 3 or 4 weeks, we've seen for the first time in 3 years or so, 4 years, a downward trend in fentanyl heroin-related overdose deaths.
Okay.
And that's the first time in years.
So is there anything we can unpack with that? Because, this being – because it feels like every year it's been a record year. I mean, record after record after record. So if we start to see a stemming of the tide in that, I mean, I think that would be a bigger morale boost than even homicide numbers coming down.
Yeah, so it was it's good to see, but it's only been 3 weeks.
Oh, okay.
And it's 5%. So we're looking at that right now. We still have some weeks to go, but that was encouraging to us that something is changing. What that is, I do know that, and I think we've talked about this before. Look, the Sheriff's Office Narcotics Division works their tails off, and they work very big and hard cases, and they make very substantial cases, and made another one yesterday. They're actively looking at those who deal and sell this poison that is killing people. And so I think some of the effort has to go to their big cases.
No, absolutely. Yeah, we had a story in Top Stories and Trending about a woman who's been arrested. The heroin and there was another drug, both laced with fentanyl. Steve, are we seeing this where this is basically everything has fentanyl now?
You run a risk. Anything, any kind of drug, can be mixed with fentanyl. We've seen it a small number of times powdered into marijuana. It's cut into cocaine. It's cut into heroin. The scary thing is when we come across the dealers that have the pill presses that will make counterfeit pills that will look like legitimate, prescription drugs like Adderall or some other drug, but it's really packed with fentanyl. That's the scary stuff, because some people will take that and assume it's one drug that they're used to taking, and then it's an overdose scenario when they realize there's fentanyl in there. That the pill presses to me and the people who are using them, that's a really dangerous situation.
I mean, not to get too deep into the weeds here, but is that when the fentanyl is sold, when the overdose happens, there's no way to find out what the user was trying to buy, is there?
It really depends on what kind of, if you have witnesses, if you have phone records, if you have text messages, if you have some sort of information that leads you to believe what their last few hours were focused on, then maybe you can find it. But a lot of times if somebody's just overdosed and the police or law enforcement just stumbles on them at a racetrack or something else, or a gas station or hotel, then you're kind of in the dark on what really happened.
It's scary stuff, because you just don't know. You mentioned Adderall. Someone seeking Adderall, to me, it feels like there'll be a completely different vibe than someone saying, you know what, heroin's just not doing it for me anymore. I need the next kick. Like, I don't know how to break that down.
Yeah, it's a difficult problem. Most of the folks that we deal with want the fentanyl, but there are some obviously that don't think they're taking it and get it, and the results are not good.
We're talking with District Attorney Hillar Moore. We're also talking with Steve Danielson, breaking down some of the numbers this year. Steve, when y'all want to get back to the non-fatal shootings for just a minute, is the correlation the same when it comes to the hotspots? Do we see the shootings come from the same regardless of effect?
We do see a lot of shootings in the hotspot areas. Unfortunately, we're seeing some shootings that are bleeding outside of that. If the shooting event is involving some sort of rivals, they may take advantage of shooting each other any place, and that's where you'll get a lot of media attention when those events happen. In some public place, like say the Mall of Louisiana or some other place, that just it scares the public immensely. But a lot of times it's a targeted event where somebody sees a rival that they don't like and takes advantage of an opportunity to try to eliminate them.
All right, tell you what, we got a break coming up here in just a minute, so we're going to break here on air. We'll continue talking over on Facebook Live as we check your money now and as we check traffic. Before we get to that break, though, I want to remind you about the folks over at Citizens Bank and Trust, looking to help you out this holiday season. How about putting $15,000 in your bank account? Spend it however you like, but go to talk1073.com right now and register to win your $15K sweepstakes. Now, that $15,000 prize is a national prize. The folks over at Citizens Bank and Trust, when they teamed up with us, installed a $1,500 local prize. So you've got more than one prize available, but it starts by going to talk1073.com. Click on the 15K sweepstakes flipper that you see right there. Enter your email address and get yourself entered to win it right now. The 15K sweepstakes presented by Citizens Bank and Trust. It's going on right now at talk1073.com. Quick break. We're going to check your money now. We're going to check traffic. We're going to come back and close it out next, talking about how can you help in this overall battle. That continues next. So we'll shift over to
lock it up,
and I'll make a buffoon of
time
myself.
of year.
You could ask her. I did this. Like, was it yesterday or the day before? What? With the talking about if you're not locking up your gun.
Or save a shell. Saving a shell from your gun in case your gun is stolen. Would like to know that you have fired your weapon and that shell came out of your gun. So that if you
keep the serial number, keep a spent shell casing. A spent shell casing can be entered into the NIBIN system, and it can help us track the use of a stolen firearm, which is sometimes helpful.
So there's legislation in many states that when you sell a weapon, that weapon has to come with an ejected shell from that gun, and it's given to the owner. But Louisiana does not have that law, to my knowledge. We don't have to have a shell case in it. We've also found in some of those states that the shell that they said came from that gun didn't.
Okay.
So they make mistakes.
But you'd fire another round just to do a comparison, right?
So we would like the gun owner, if he has a gun, new or used, to fire that weapon at a range and secure his shells, put it in a bag and keep it.
Okay.
In case his gun's stolen. Because we seize every shell casing that there is on the street, and we run them all through our ATF NIBIN system, and it can link that shell on the ground at a crime scene to the stolen weapon if we get it. It is important.
Not to dig too deep into the science here, but how are they all different? How is it? I mean, it's a
Steve
mass
can probably answer
weapon.
better than I can, but
I can't give you the science. There are some markings that can be unique, but there are challenges. Glock, I want to say Glocks are a little tougher than some other models.
Mm-hmm.
There are the 7.62, the AK-47s are even a little more challenging, so you can't necessarily get a lead off it. And then to get a confirmation, that's about an 8-hour process by one of the ballistics experts at the Louisiana State Police Crime Lab to be able to say this gun fired that shell case.
Yeah.
But what we focus on are the leads. A technician will look at them, put it into the database, opine, we think this shell case is from that gun, which gets us down the road, but not necessarily.
We get compared city to city and all over the United States, and they put out so many leads, but if they need to confirm it, then a scientist has to confirm the two. We have a really robust NIBIN system here. People at the crime lab and city and the sheriff do an outstanding job here compared to all over the United States. Very quick turnaround.
And that's important.
It's huge.
The quicker the better. Yeah, and we're seeing our crime guns, going across the river, going down the interstate. There are multiple jurisdictions, and kind of keeping track of them. You can't necessarily, say the person that's apprehended with that gun is necessarily the shooter.
Right.
But if you can get it in
got to talk to him.
Time compressed scenario, and you can get law enforcement to question them, and that person says, well, I've had this gun for 6 months, and there was a fatal shooting a couple days before he was caught with it. It helps you get some intelligence on what's going on out there. And then you got the clock switches, auto sears, which are.
So people actually like want to buy.
Yeah, they want the high.
So what the oddest thing you'll see is that if a dealer is selling drugs and one of his clients, passes away, and the other addicts find out about it, they have this kind of Superman mentality where they think, well, that must be some really good stuff that dealer's dispensing. And, it's not going to happen to me because, I've got a lot of tolerance, or I'm not going to take that much or whatever. And then it can spiral. So, whether they actively search for fentanyl as opposed to, I don't know, but it's a better, I think it's a better high. And there's just so much.
Is there also, like there were
some
other things with it. But there's also the misconception that fentanyl is fentanyl. Like when we have 3 kids and I'm sitting right next to the machine with the anesthesia when Christy's delivering and fentanyl was listed.
Yeah.
That's not the same thing, right? Like
It was controlled by the doctor, and you know what you're getting.
Right.
Yeah, because I got 2 shots of it when I got in a car accident. So, and then they already gave me.
The first time I saw it was an offender who put on a lab coat, went in the hospital, and found the fentanyl patches, which are used for end of life kind of time released pain management. And I couldn't believe that somebody was that industrious, I suppose, or creative to put the lab coat.
They chew them. They chew the patches, right?
And then they'll they'll put it in paper, or they'll soak paper in it, and then the paper will be sent to the jails, and then the inmates will have access to it, because you can't necessarily test every piece of paper that comes in and out of the correctional environment.
856 Talk 107.3 FM WBRP. A couple minutes left with Hillar Moore and Steve Danielson. We're talking a little bit about what's contributing to the crime numbers in Baton Rouge. And Hillar, I looked up during the break. You were talking about 70816. That includes Sherwood at I-12. That includes Airline at I-12. And when you're talking about, if the conversation crosses over to drugs, then there's been a couple of hotspots along there, just building wise. The number of
motels.
calls. Yep.
And we've discussed this on 2 shows ago.
Yeah.
Had been lighting up a lot.
Let's talk about this from our perspective, though, as just everyday citizens. What can we be doing to help out in this regard?
Just what you've been preaching to people on your radio show for a long time. I know you are keenly aware of this, but the majority of our, not a majority, a big number of our guns that we see used in crime or come from our good people's homes and cars.
Yes.
And they're not locked.
No.
And we see people going around pulling on door handles, looking for the easy way. We also see people with guns in their hands on video pulling on door handles. So it's also dangerous for you not to have your car locked if you're going to try to intervene. So, we have a 9 p.m. routine. At 9 p.m., do you know where your kids are?
Right.
Do you know where your valuables are? Do you know where your gun is?
Yes.
Lock up your house, lock up your car, turn on your outside exterior lights, lock your windows, make sure you know where everything is.
I find it unbelievably infuriating when somebody, number one, leaving a gun in a car. Number 2, leaving that car unlocked. And I'm of the practice of nothing should be in plain sight within your vehicle. Give them no reason to even, if you're pulling on the handle, you're looking for something you're not already seeing. Steve, you were telling us about something during the break that I find fascinating. Beyond locking your car and removing your gun from your car and keeping everything under lock and key, there's a little more identification you could do as a gun owner.
Yeah, so making sure that you have your serial number written down in a place, and usually what would be great is if you could write it down on an envelope, the serial number and make and model of your firearm, and then test fire your firearm and take a couple shell cases that you fired through it, empty shell cases, put it in that envelope and store that someplace else. When the firearms get stolen, a lot of times they're going to pop up in crimes. And if you can provide law enforcement with a spent shell casing, we can enter it into the NIBIN database, which is an ATF database, which can examine and analyze spent shell cases. And they can generate a lead. And we may be able to see where that stolen firearm is popping up or being used, and hopefully eventually try to get it back off the street and back to its owner.
Unfortunately, the only way it comes across your desk at that point is when something bad happened, though.
Sometimes they'll abandon them, but it is a crime-related incident where we're recovering the guns, and it's unfortunate. But keeping it safe, keeping that gun, with you inside the house, locked up, is really crucially important this time of year.
Brian, now with the number of gun sales that we've seen through COVID, there's a really substantial big number during those 2 years, and so we know we have more legal guns that people have bought that could turn into illegal weapons that we didn't have before.
And that spent shell casing is kind of like your gun's fingerprint. Hillar Moore, Steve Danielson, we're straight up out of time. I appreciate y'all stopping in today.
Thank you, man.
Fox News Rundown's next.